And there we go. So happy Wednesday night, everybody. We are here on Google Hangouts, and we are talking with a good friend of mine and a UDL evangelist. In fact, the guy who I stole that phrasing from, Kit Hard, talking about designing for classroom culture and designing environments and what that looks like as we start the beginning of the year. Also on the line, we'll go around and starting with Eric, you can just kind of introduce yourself real quick. Or Kim, you can jump in, that's cool.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Kim Shovelbein from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. I'm a Universal Design for Learning coach for our district. I'm actually probably more coordinator, I guess. So I'm just really excited to share what we've been experiencing as well as learn from you wonderful people and all of our audience that's listening in.
And then we got Ron Rogers online too. Ron, why don't you give us a little quick bio?
Okay, I'm Ron Rogers, and I'm from Ohio. Of course, you know, here in Ohio, we all love the Buckeyes. So, you know, and I work for OCALI, Highest Center for Autism and Low Incidence. And, well, Kit and I and all of us, we welcome everybody to the UDL chat 9 o'clock after we're done here.
That's it. That's the plug. I love it. So go ahead, Eric. You're on.
So I'm Eric Moore. I'm working with the UDL-IRN right now as an intern. I'm also a PhD candidate at University of Tennessee. Basically, my interest is focusing on pre-service teacher development, and especially in equipping them to use UDL in their future classrooms. So I'm working on some solutions right now. Normally with these kinds of things I have a transcription team because I'm hard of hearing, and this electronic format is actually quite a bit more difficult for me. I don't have that available right now, so I'm trying to call in with some text-based features and still working on it. So I'm sorry I'm not very active right now, but it's good to meet you all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and we'll get through some of the UDL-IRN stuff, and then the man's going to take over the mic. So again, welcome everybody to our first UDL-IRN Google Hangout of the year, but our second one overall. The first one we did you can find on our archives. It's taking a minute to load up. And then down here you can see join us over at udlirn.org, which is an amazing website. Full of great research and great tools for everybody to use and take a look at. The protocol that we're going to use, the Hangout lasts for about an hour, and the first 20 of that is really identifying the problem. And so in this case, Kit's going to lay it out for us and say what he sees as a problem around designing for culture and designing using UDL to design for culture and design for environments. The second section of that 2020 protocol is the potential solutions, where Kit and the rest of us will kind of lay out what we think are solutions that we're seeing or what we've seen work. And then the final portion of that is more open conversation. So in order for that to happen, it's incredibly important that you guys are following us, follow along in the conversation on Twitter. And so we got some people that are managing the Twitter lines right now. In fact, UDL Center just sent us a tweet, so saying join the chat directly after this. I'm getting to it, UDL Center. But using the hashtag UDL-IRN, please join in on the conversation and tell us what you're seeing out there in the field as well. And then you can follow us on YouTube. Here's the YouTube link very quickly, and it's also in our chat notes. Or you can follow us on Google Plus because it's streaming there as well. I got to make a plug for the 2016 UDL-IRN Summit. It's coming March 16th and 17th. It is not a place you want to miss. Am I right, Kim?
It was pretty wonderful. I would recommend it highly.
That's it. There you go. She says it was pretty wonderful. You want to be there. This year it's in Towson University in Maryland. We're still calling for proposals now, so get in there. Tell us what you want to talk about and share some of your great implementation. And finally, but not by any means least, do not forget to join us over in UDL chat tonight, where my man Ron Rogers and myself will be moderating, talking about continuing this conversation and talking about how our PLNs and variability exists and all sorts of really great, interesting stuff. There'll be another plug for this at the end of this. So with that, let me introduce the man himself, as I'm stopping sharing and it's going back to my picture. My good friend, Kid Hard. Can I call you my good friend, Kid Hard?
Absolutely.
All right, even better. So I'm trying to exit out of it. I'm trying to get back to my picture. Now, Kid has had many positions where he's done great things. Currently, he's working over in Michigan. He's working in Port Huron, and you are are you the coordinator or supervisor?
I guess they're giving me supervisor right now.
Look at that. Look at my man stepping up. He's the supervisor of professional learning and what else?
Instructional technology.
Instructional technology and innovation and everything that's good with Port Huron. Am I right?
Absolutely.
So I first met Kid. I'm just going to drop this real quick. I first met Kid actually at a McCall, which is our local ISTE affiliate, and he was giving this great demonstration on how to use context and how to use Google Lit Trips and lots of cool things. And the one thing that sticks out to me, brother, is this wonderful mane of hair that you have, your brilliant speaking style, and you had on this amazing vest, brother. And so I was like, I need to chat with that dude. So I went up there and introduced myself, and he blew me off, of course. And no, he said, "Who is this really strange, furry-looking Muppet that's coming up and talking to me?" And then I found him later as we started working through UDL, and ever since then, I love the man's words. So when the time came to ask somebody about joyful learning and the power of using UDL to design culture and environment, Kit was the only choice for me. And the only choice for UDL-IRN. So without further ado, I'm done talking and I'm done being the MC. I'm going to turn it over to my man, Kit. Kit, take it away, brother.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that introduction. And yeah, I remember back at that McCall conference when we first kind of connected, and it's awesome that Universal Design for Learning is kind of still alive and well here in Michigan. Even though I'm technically actually over in Ohio, or not Ohio, sorry, Ron, Ontario right now. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can start showing some of the slides that I've got for this evening. And hopefully you're able to see what I've got on my screen. Give me a whoop whoop if you are seeing my presentation.
Yeah, it looks wonderful. I got you.
All right, great. So I'll just say a couple quick things about myself before I kind of dig into this. And one being that I live in Ontario, but I work in Michigan, so I get to drive across the border every day from Canada to the United States, which has added some interesting perspectives to my life. I really have enjoyed kind of that cross-cultural experience, even though there's a lot of similarities between the countries. But it's been a really remarkable time in my life. I grew up out in Wyoming and went to school in Montana, so I'm kind of a Westerner that has found himself in Canada, and my accent's all messed up, and I say a lot. But I married a Canadian. And there's a picture of my family down here that hopefully you can see. And we had a wonderful trip this summer to Quebec. And my kids are both in a French immersion program over here, which is a real great thing for them. And we got to experience that French culture in Quebec. And that was just something that has really kind of informed my current thinking right now, too. I really found that experience amazing. So I wanted to share that with all of you. And then this picture here of me was taken really recently. So I've just taken this new job with Port Huron Schools as a technology integration supervisor. So I spend a lot of time working with teachers, helping them to use technology in the most effective ways. And I thought that this picture of me was somewhat symbolic. I feel that my universal design for learning role is still a little bit hidden. It's kind of under the radar, and so the fact that you can't quite make me out here, I'm sort of this shadowy figure moving through the room. So I'm embedding universal design for learning in hopefully effective ways, but not overt ways yet with my district because I'm still new there. But it's my hope to bring universal design for learning to the forefront of the work that I do with technology integration. So I wanted to share that. So we'll kind of get into this 2020 format. I will do my best not to completely blow it up, but I do have some kind of guiding questions that I'm hoping folks will resonate around and be able to respond to, that sort of present that problem to us. So I'll start with this idea of what do our learning spaces say about our educational values and beliefs? And I want to clarify, when I'm talking about learning spaces, I don't necessarily just mean bricks and mortar and tables and chairs, lighting. I also really want us to dig deeper into that social emotional piece, the environment and the culture that we create, and that all is part of our learning spaces and how we communicate to our students and ourselves and our community about our educational values and beliefs. So I'm hoping that you'll all, I'm hoping also not to just be this talking head. So I'm going to tell you a little storytelling as I go through these with these pictures that I have, and then at any point I'm going to kind of pause and see if my friends here who are live with me want to chime in and maybe kind of tap on over into the Twitter chat to see what folks are saying. So I'll tell you just a little story. This goes back to my history. The majority of my universal design for learning sort of gestation took place in this building that you see here. Spent a lot of time in this classroom. And it was a high school for 9th and 10th grade students who were essentially disengaged from the educational process. They no longer saw the value in school, and they were on a trajectory of leaving school too soon, leaving the learning process too soon. And we were tasked with finding ways to re-engage them and to use cross-curricular planning, to use technology, to use project-based learning, and to use whatever else we kind of individually brought in our toolbox to the table. So looking at this picture and with the prompt of what does this say about our educational values and beliefs, I don't want the caution tape to get read in too heavily there. Although I think sometimes we have kind of put up emotional caution tape around our buildings and around our classrooms, so that's something to think about in terms of the problem and what we're looking to do in eliminating barriers and creating inviting spaces for learning. But the reason that there's caution tape up in this picture is because we were in the midst of a forensics project-based learning lesson. It was our whole building became transformed by this crime scene. The principal was murdered, not literally, but it was we had video testimonies from suspects. We had DNA sampling kits that students were engaging around. The classrooms were essentially dismantled. There wasn't desks in a row for several weeks. This classroom existed as a crime scene and remained preserved during that time. And so I share that as not so much a solution, but just an inspiration around what that might have been communicating at that time. So I'll pause for a second because I do see that there's even a question, or not so much a question, but maybe also trying to kind of invite others in about what do our learning spaces communicate. So I'll open it up to our group now for a moment.
Kid, I love this this analogy that you put out there, where you say, We put up some caution tape, and that that was part of the lesson. But when you started talking about this idea that we put up caution tape around our classrooms in different ways, I find that to be a profound statement, because I really think that what you're really stating is that because we're lacking in designing variability, or we're not taking that always into consideration, we're really telling our students before they even step in that this may not be the place for you.
Yeah.
And when I think about it in that term, I don't think there's a teacher out there that does that intentionally.
Right.
So I guess a lot of my question comes around the idea of how is it possible for us to always stay kind of almost like hyper vigilant about that idea of design?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So, anybody got any thoughts out there? Also, I want to go back and I want to say that Kim Coy, or @Coy_Kimberly, is out there pushing and contributing to the chat on Twitter. And so she hasn't hit me with a question yet, but she's she's out there, she's active. I'm happy to see her. She's my girl, of course. And she reiterates the question, like, what do our learning spaces really say about us? And Kit, you highlighted yourself, they may say caution. So
yeah.
How do we get around that? How do we move around that?
Right.
I'll turn it over.
So this is just another picture from that school that I worked at, and again, thinking a little bit beyond just the spaces of these schools and what the culture we're creating. What I saw happening in this particular building was we were trying to invite students into that learning process and to make them have ownership over the space and what it meant to learn there. So these students had designed a speedway for balloon cars that were going to be part of both a science and math lesson, and the creation of the speedway, the design of the cars, the kind of engagement around the competition, and really sort of in being very tangible with this math and science learning were some of the things that we were tasked with doing and hoping to accomplish. At the same time, when I look and I knew these students, I know that even with this, and even with what we saw before in the picture, we weren't always successful in having our learning environment say to these students, we welcome you, we honor where you are in your learning process, and we're here to all work together in that. So I think that I want to widen that problem again. Even if you do have what I thought was a pretty amazing learning space that we had been very intentional in the design of, what does it say to us if our learning space still isn't communicating that? Even when you think you're doing your very best work. This is another picture where what I think is interesting about this is that we were really active in using the whole building, not just the interior spaces of the building. And just as a background to this picture, we turned the side of the building into essentially our X and Y axis. And we created this trebuchet. Students brought in personal objects from home, so some people brought fruits and bananas, and some people brought little stuffed animals, and they got to launch whatever they wanted to launch on the trebuchet. And we recorded each launch with a video camera, and then everyone got their own individual video file to chart out the trajectory of their launch as part of a way of looking at linear equations or parabolas and some algebraic thinking, and to give them some authentic data that was their own to work with. So I share that again as just there was a lot of design and thinking behind this, and around creating voice and choice and personalizing, challenging mathematical concepts. And it was an attempt at addressing that question of how the physical environment and also the academic environment were meant to be engaging, and yet when I look, it's not all smiles and fun. There's still challenges to that. So before I move into what I see as kind of another prompt to that question, I'll open it up again to the group and see if there's any thoughts.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, if I was just going to speak to, so as a part of, I mentioned earlier, we have 30 new pilots going through this year, and as a part of implementing UDL, we've kind of developed this 4-pillar approach, and one of the pillars is looking at like the overall classroom environment, including the physical spaces. So we've actually, as a part of this pilot, have introduced like some flexible furniture, and in fact in these classrooms there are desks for some kids who may still need those, because that's how some kids do stay engaged. They need that structure of a desk. But we have genius bars that we built along the side windows for the natural light, and just some flexible furniture, just to promote that more collaborative community. And we've seen like students do feel more comfortable, and the room changes with the activity depending on if they're doing group work or if they're doing more of like a mini lesson kind of thing. So the room kind of changes with what with the learners and what they need for particular subjects, if that makes sense. And students are encouraged to find the places where they can work at their best, and giving them that like empowerment has been like really successful. Students that maybe would have felt the need to leave the classroom before to kind of find their own space are able to find a place near the genius bar where suddenly they're more comfortable staying within the classroom and that kind of thing. So that's a kind of a work in progress with us too, but we figure as we move forward with UDL implementation to make more flexible room environments, the kind of that are conducive to the learner variability that we have in our classrooms as well.
I think that there's a really interesting point that Kim, you were highlighting, and Kit, that you were presenting, and it's this idea that if our environmental space is conducive, so I love this idea of building genius bars in classrooms and really toying with the physical environment, allowing students to really have some design principles in that, because they're designers and they're end users of their own design, but working with that starts to build that culture of collaboration, which is really a culture that is being fostered and it starts to be more accepting of variability. Mm-hmm. And Kit, correct me if I'm wrong, but the spaces that you're showing us, and really it seems that you're talking about really non-traditional classrooms, and classrooms where we're really focused on projects, and we're very focused on the journey towards the project. And as we do that, as we put that non-traditional, non-bureaucratically driven kind of education forward, are we allowing? Is that in and of itself what fosters this this idea of taking down the caution tape? I'm going to go back to it because I love it so much. Taking down the caution tape around our classrooms and saying, hey, all students can exist here. I'm going to leave that as a question for you guys to answer. First, I got to give a shout out to my girl Koi_Kim on Twitter. She's got her whole crew from Fresno, her soon-to-be teachers watching us. So, a shout out to them. UDL shout out to them. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to everybody kind of chatting.
Well, and I think what Kimberly was saying, and even that with both Kimberlys, this idea, we've got some pre-service teachers that may be watching this, and Eric working with pre-service teachers. My question is even though we've designed these spaces maybe with some intentionality, what I also experienced, and maybe is part of the problem, is that teachers coming into these spaces almost need to be retrained in what it is to teach in those spaces. Go ahead and say.
I was going to say de-institutionalized.
Yes, because one of the rooms in this building that I worked in had lots of windows, had that fishbowl piece, was meant to be a very transparent type of classroom, and almost every teacher that ever was asked to teach in there felt compelled to cover those windows with posters and paper, and there was very little that could be done to convince them otherwise, and that there's a value in that transparency. And so while we worked through some of the pieces of this space is meant to be different and used differently, and the students were very open to it in a lot of ways, changing instructional practice, it's like changing the learning environment inside too, or the teaching environment inside of us as well.
Well, I think the focus is, it has to be more student oriented rather, than the teacher being like that traditional stand up in front of the class. You're right, it is a mind shift. A lot of our teachers have even, they've removed their desks completely so that it completely looks like it's student centered when you walk in, or if they have a desk, it's a smaller one, like tucked in the corner, and that just speaks volumes too about like where the focus is when you enter those classrooms. But you're right, it is a mind change.
Yeah.
So Kim and Kit, as you were talking about these, and I love the idea of getting rid of the teacher desk and decentralizing instruction in these non-traditional classrooms, environmentally non-traditional classrooms that you're talking about. Is it a conscious choice that comes from the teacher as they get more and more involved in UDL principles, or is it something that's a mandate that starts to be handed, or does it create its own norms amongst the teaching culture? What have you guys kind of experienced in those areas?
Well, I've seen it come from both ways. Actually, I think you'll hear some teachers talk about how, we have like a number of bodies in the classroom, and so they just all of a sudden when they look at their space and how to use it more productively, they're like, do I really need this big honking desk, in the room? And we've even, our teachers, as they get into learning more about UDL and learner variability, like they're very strategic even what they're putting on their walls now. Like, in fact, we say to them, before you put something on your wall, you need to be able to answer the question, like, is this a want? Or is this something I need for instruction? Because we want just those classrooms to be very, stimulating, but not too overstimulating for certain, students that fall within that variability range, the edges.
I think those points, it is that combination of mandated pieces help to maybe initiate or create that first momentum, but I think it's experiencing those UDL principles firsthand as teachers take on some of those pieces and start to own and identify some of the ways that they're designing the learning environment, both physically and emotionally, design and academically, as they start to take ownership over and identifying it against those universal design for learning principles, and seeing how it's also translating to a classroom culture that is honoring variability, then that's where that momentum really can start to take off. So ultimately, it does have to be an owned piece by the team.
And beyond that too, like when they do take away their teachers, that's like something that a lot of our teams have done, is establish another area within the building that they can come together as a collaborative team and plan around. the variability that exists in their classroom. So they still have that collaborative, or even more so because they've developed a space where their focus is more around, planning for their variability too. So just wanted to bring that point out as well. Like, they may be giving up their desk in their classroom, but they've created another space where they're able to be more collaborative.
So I think what you're saying is that there's this move, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to paraphrase it. There's this move from what we believe to be traditional teaching, standing up, kind of delivering, the learning, all right, to this idea of really we are designers, and we're designing not only the space that we exist in, the space that our students exist in, but that then forces this collaborative sense that starts happening. Am I summarizing that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that concept, and so I'm gonna also throw it back to Twitter because at @Koi_Kim. Kimberly is asking the question to Kit and everybody else: how can new teachers step out and affect change to their environments? And I think that's huge. Like, how are you going to feel safe doing that?
Right. And I guess that kind of transitions into, and Mitch asks for practical advice about that. First-year elementary teachers utilizing classroom space in non-traditional ways. What would that look like? And I know most of my pictures are going to be kind of at that secondary level, although I spend a lot of time in elementary now. And what I'll just share quickly in terms of my slides and maybe lead into that conversation about what are some practical things. It's the beginning of the year, and teachers around the country are introducing the culture of their classroom in a lot of interesting and creative ways, and this is a time to really to step out and affect the change of environment as a new teacher or as an elementary teacher. So finding those activities and strategies. I'm seeing a lot in my own building right now in Port Huron where we're spending time asking students to be designers of the norms and visions and expectations of the classroom, rather than the teachers being the sole source of that information. And I'll just say with these pictures, this actually was at the end of the year, but it could have been at the beginning of the year in terms of just finding ways to let students soar, really, and have very tangible ways to be part of that learning environment. I would set up at our school, I would just plant myself at the very front of the building as students would come in the morning, and I would ask them all sorts of different questions. I used digital tools as my vehicle, but it was really about learning. I wanted to know as much as I could about our students, and I wanted our teachers in the building to also have that insight. And but in the process of using these sort of social emotional, who are you, tell me about yourself, what are your goals, what are your dreams, we were also facilitating the use of these same tools for academic content, and it didn't interfere with our classroom time. It was sort of a soft introduction to the technology, which was part of what I was tasked to do, but without it interfering with the academic needs of the classroom time. And then we also let students in our building have a real say in the actual space of the building, and so this is a student designing a landscaping project for our building, because we had very little landscaping when this building was designed, and we wanted students to have a hand in that, and we tried to incorporate different math principles, science principles, and a lot of language arts into that project. But building culture in that first part of the school year, it is to invite students into saying, this is your space and place for learning, and we're a community. And so we can create that community with no academic pieces, but we also found ways to make it part of how we learn, what we need to learn.
Absolutely. We've been doing a lot of the same things with our pilots during the first few weeks. they've really been concentrating on building that classroom community and culture. We followed Dr. Jennifer Cates' work with the social and emotional learning piece. So we've really been tapping into, really diving into kids. What are your intelligences that you can offer to this classroom, so that you can feel more, like a contributing citizen, that you are needed and you are an important and integral part of this community. So I totally agree. We've been spending a ton of time on community building and just classroom culture, and I think it'll pay off academically later, because the kids will feel more just a part of that community, and it'll be a safe and comfortable place to learn, a safe place to make mistakes and learn from them. And we've tried to, instill that kind of culture within our classrooms as well.
That's it brings up an interesting point too. So on the Twitter feed, there have been some questions, and I threw out these two really cool places. The Adaptive Design Lab, they build some really, really sweet stuff out of cardboard, whether it be partitions or slant boards or pizza box desks or chairs, which is a really low-cost way of changing your seating from materials that are already there. And more importantly, it can be done by students. So they have a lot of great stuff. It's the Adaptive Design Lab. And then there's another one called the Mod Lab, and that's out of California. And they do a lot of great stuff, not only with that, but also with like video games and gamification and some really interesting stuff around social justice work and digital humanities work. And those are great places to go and check out. But there's this question of, well, it's the beginning of the year, right? So I know high school teachers that I'm working with here in Michigan, and they're 2 weeks into the school year, and they're already have to do a mid-unit assessment because they're halfway through a unit already. So how do you balance this need for culture and this need for classroom identity and who fits where and being able to understand? Because that's really the only way that we understand variability is by embracing it and actually identifying it and seeing it. How do we balance that with this massive push that in 2 weeks I'm already halfway through a unit? How do we do that? Does anybody, that's $1 million question, I understand, but any thoughts?
Some of our high school teachers have used, Google Forms and things like that to learn about the students individually, because you'll have students that will tell them things about themselves that they might not otherwise say out loud. So they just look for, try to meet the kids in their interests and where they are, and find ways to interact with them, on their level and their interests.
And I think it really is one of those $1 million questions, Brian, because that pressure for academic success quickly, immediately, measurable now, is rather than an emphasis on growth, something that we can see each individual making progress through. It's difficult to change the political climate of the testing and data, and I think data can be important, but we are looking at it in ways sometimes that are far removed from the individuals that data is coming from. And I guess that's why teachers are so amazing, because in spite of that, they are still finding ways to build relationships. Yes, we have an exam coming up. It's going to be important. I'm going to find ways to help you be successful. And I see a lot of, it's the best examples that I see sometimes are those really, it's just being very explicit with constant, it's kind of a language thing. I think that my question about how do our words reflect that, and when I see teachers just every word out of their mouth sort of, kind of involves that honoring of their students and the challenges and risks and failures and effort and persistence, and I think that watching what we say could be a very good way to start the school year in terms of creating that environment. And then also, I think, listening. That's one of the things that keeps coming up in my world, is how do we create more opportunities to listen to our students and to let them have that voice, but also as experts and content experts, and encouraging them to become the voice in the classroom as learners. And I like digital tools that allow 100% participation, but then also have this transparency of peer learning, where students are responding to each other. But it takes a lot of scaffolding too. But I think when we talk with these questions of how can we change environment, and how do we at the beginning of the year build non-traditional spaces, those digital spaces can be very non-traditional too, but we have to I'm a big fan of stems, kind of word stems and phrases that help students to know how to respond appropriately to each other, so that they can also continue that conversation in healthy ways with each other in those spaces.
So as we're nearing our last 10 minutes, and before we're going to do some plugging and some other things. Kit, in your opinion, and everybody else, please weigh in as well, and people out on Twitter, please weigh in as well. So this is a daunting task, right? So I have to design my environment, I have to design my lessons and my learning, which in and of itself is a huge test. But then I also have to try and build the culture. Is there a practical way for me to do that? Like, where do I start? All right, let's just get down to brass tacks. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Do I begin with it all? Because if I'm a new teacher, beginning with it all, or even if I am a seasoned, veteran, wise teacher trying to make a huge shift to a UDL mentality, or to a mentality of fostering variability and designing for variability, in either case, it's a huge undertaking. So where should I start?
Well, I'm just going to jump down a couple slides, and I'll have to put the link to this so that people can click on them. I'm just going to I had 3 things that I kind of pulled in as resources that I've been interested in that maybe are practical places for that. The second one, learning about your students through seating chart challenges, really resonated with me this year as some very practical pieces of how you can get to know your students through challenges that are part of whatever content you're teaching, but create cooperative learning opportunities, true cooperative learning that has that positive interdependence and individual accountability. So I thought this article was very practical in that sort of beginning of year ways to, and even at a semester change or any kind of time when we transition students to new environments. The other is this creating space for risk, especially for an elementary environment. Michael Thornton is someone I've admired. I'm going to butcher the name of the school district. It's Marble County School District. It's in Virginia. A lot of people are probably familiar with some of their work. This was an Edutopia article. I'll just pull it up here for a second. We'll see if it loads. But I think this is an interesting article because in part that district has really done some things physically with their spaces. I'll see if they show. I know there were some photos, or I believe there were some photos in here. Nope, this one he's just talking about it. Pardon me. Here we go. Where you know, part of it is having that physical space, but what Michael really kind of speaks to is some of the ways that they are using the strategies at the beginning of the year to get students to take risks, to be taking ownership over their learning. So I share those two links as practical resources, and I'll throw those into the chat.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll put them up in the chat, and then we'll also put them in the archive, and we'll add them to the Storify that we're going to post up in the UDL-IRN website. So those are some great resources. Kim at Coy_Kimberly makes a great statement out on Twitter. She says, the first step is to create or start the culture you are looking for, right? And I think that's kind of where what everybody's been saying, and that your space will come. You start to put your space together too, but really this idea of starting with your culture and building your culture. I don't know, what do you think out there in Wisconsin, Kim?
Oh, I would agree. Some of the resources like we did for our pilot this summer too, entering the school year, we did look at some of the growth mindset language and those kinds of things to build into our everyday, and it does tie in very well with the affective network. And Dr. Rose would even say teaching is emotional work, and so I'm a firm believer that when you build those relationships with students and really give them a comfortable, safe place to learn, that the rest will come, But I do really firmly believe that, at the heart of, of all we know about the brain is that affective network, and it's really important to tie that social emotional piece to build that culture for learning. I think it's crucial.
It's so interesting that you said that, Kim, because just as you were saying that, at Princess Unicorn or Casey Overstreet, she says, build up the UDL culture you want by breaking down the affective filter. And so I think that was out on Twitter. So I think that's just such a great tie between the two of what you're talking about. And really, teaching is emotional work, right? And that's why we do it, right? And it's passionate work, and it has to be passion-driven work. And I think it's so, what you both are saying is that it's not just passion work from our side, from our teaching side. It's passion work from what our students do as well. And
Absolutely.
As we build students who are passionate about their learning and passionate about the design of their own learning, then we start that cultural revolution. And I think to me that's a brilliant statement that you both are making. And so let's see, Kit posted up over on Twitter, if you're following UDL-IRN, so it'll be in the Storify as well, his links to his presentation. And just, you know what, Kit, there's some great pictures in there, man. That's what I love about your presentation. I was looking at it. I was real jealous. I'm like, man, that guy's put in some good work. And he's just got some amazing artifacts that are being created from that. Kit, I also know that you're pretty big in the makerspace movement, as well as different maker fairs and things like that. How do you see those things connecting to UDL?
I guess that was one place that I was going to maybe go to in terms of where's that potentiality that's sort of on the fringe of our schools that we could maybe be informed by. And so I've been involved in a robotics program at the high school level, and then building some coding clubs and maker type spaces at the elementary level. And I guess what I'm seeing in those environments are part of it is space and what is actually there, the tangible elements of learning, things that we can create with and design with and express our learning with. And the maker movement's interesting because you have this sort of convergence of digital and analog, where we can use paper and glue and Arduino boards and LED lights, and suddenly the craft has become connected, and because of social media and YouTube and sharing, it can become something that others learn along with us, or we learn from them, and there's this very dynamic sort of interplays between learner and teacher in those environments. So in the robotics, there are these mentors who are the adults, who are the experts, and yet the learning is really driven by the students and the design challenge, and I think makerspaces also explore that as well. And so the other piece of that I found really interesting is that who we consider traditionally the best learners in these spaces, there seems to be so many more pathways and avenues for everyone to have success as learners in there, and that our robotics team attracted a very diverse group of learners that in a traditional classroom might be almost sort of shunned or fear, I've got these students who represent this to me and that I have concerns about my ability to support. But in the makerspace or in the robotics, they're just part of the team and we're all part of working together. So I've been inspired by that.
I love that. I love that story, man, and I love that the way that you talk about it. That students are really working towards putting forth a project, and how do we get around this thing and build this project, and how do we really build what students are really building are really complex and really well-defined skill teams where everything is being honored from the students as to what piece they can bring, and that to me is the ultimate in designing for accessibility, right? You don't have to be great at everything, but what you're really great at is absolutely something that makes the whole a better piece. So we are coming close on our last 5 minutes, and so I just want to throw it out there for any final thoughts that anybody may have, and then if you got a plug, please put it in, and then I'll come back and I'll plug some other stuff. So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna throw it back out to you. Any final thoughts? No final thoughts. Okay.
I'll just say thank you. I really enjoyed being a part of the Hangout tonight, and I've learned as much as I hopefully have contributed. So I appreciate this opportunity.
I know I've said a lot already, so maybe I was trying to kind of not completely hog the airwaves here, but what Kimberly just said too about learning from each other, in hearing your responses and your questions and even what gets put into the chat, it's this ongoing process for us as a community. I get excited by what UDL chat has done in terms of giving those of us who are passionate about still learning about UDL a place to continuously come back and sharpen the saw, and to do a webinar like this and to learn from each other. Again, another opportunity to sharpen the saw. I don't come to this being an expert in any way. I've been blessed to have some really interesting experiences that have informed why I'm passionate about universal design for learning, or even just good learning and like fun learning, that joyful learning. I really want to have that for my own children and for all the students that I have the opportunity to work with. And so where can I find more good ways to facilitate joyful learning? And I think that the work that folks like this group are doing is one of my clearest avenues to that. So thank you so much for bringing this together and doing the good work that everybody's doing.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm gonna share out real quick, do the final plugs, because UDL chat is just around the corner, and we want to make sure that we give people time to hop in their virtual vehicles and get over there. So just very quickly, again, keep this conversation rolling, folks. With the hashtag UDL-IRN, and you can combine that with UDL chat, and you can create a powerful force. And we're going to start building must UDL Twitter very soon. So you can hook up with. Oops, sorry. You can catch the archive of this on both the UDL-IRN website, which is UDL/IRN.org. Just type it in, it'll come up, and you can find us on Google+, same name, and you can find it on the YouTube channel. You can watch it here again. Also, got to make a big plug for the 2016 UDL-IRN Summit coming up March 16th and 17th. Please make sure. Pre-conference is March 15th, 2016, Towson University. It is the place to be in March. All things UDL and all things amazing will be happening from there. So come together. The summit is about bringing practitioners and bringing researchers and bringing all facets of UDL together and making just a nice UDL stew that is delicious. And then my final plug before we sign off here. Don't forget to join us in UDL chat just after the Hangout in a matter of 2 minutes. Ron had to drop out so that he could go fire up the engines and bring the atomic batteries to speed. I'll be joining him over there. We'll both be moderating it. And remember, UDL chat happens every first and third Wednesday of the month. UDL-IRN Hangout, this is our Wednesday. This is our first Wednesday. And then we will be doing it every third Thursday from here on out. Next time we're doing we're talking with folks from research, talking about some of the UDL research and what it may entail. I am saying that's one that you're going to want to check out for sure. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I want to thank all of my great participants, Eric Moore, Ron Rogers, Kim, I don't want to slaughter your last name, so I'll let you throw that part in yourself. And of course, my man Kit Hard, the UDL evangelist himself, great head of hair, fantastic insight and beautiful words. So thank you guys so much for joining and putting up with me, and dropping some knowledge bombs.
Thank
I
you.
hope to talk to you guys again. Kit, I will see you over in UDL chat, brother. I'm on my way.
Okay.
All right. I'll turn off the lights.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Bye. Thank you.